We're back, baby. It's the Horns Up Talking Texas podcast. Fisher, Tosopoulos, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Kreider, Gentlemen. It's a bit of a somber day once again. Bo Davis is leaving for the same position for the LSU Tigers. Uh, Something we knew would happen. It's not too big of a surprise. It's his alma mater. So going there and coaching at LSU is not too big of a shock, but we hate to see him go. Such a massive piece of our culture, coaching staff, of course. The work he did with Sweat and Murphy this year was very heralded. We could all remember his, epic rant that was recorded, which was a whole separate issue we discussed on the bus. And many people point to that as like a big culture change for the Texas Longhorns. So Big Bo was, again, brought a professional attitude, was a professional coach in the NFL, and he really brought it every single day. And, it was a massive part to getting us where we are today. And, I think he did his job as a Texas Longhorn, and obviously we would have loved to keep him, but we have a new co-defensive coordinator coming in from Arizona. We have PK. We lost Choate. I'm sure we'll bring somebody else in under those two at the defensive coordinator spots. And, we'll try to replace him. And that's all you can do. This, again, is the problem of being on top. You're going to lose guys, right? You're going to lose coaches. You're going to lose players. We lost A.D. Mitchell to the draft, which I know we were holding out hope for him to stay. Unfortunately, he'll be leaving and he'll be going pro, which, again, makes sense for him. He's a guy that could be a late first-round pick, early second-round pick. And, we only hope for the best. And he gave it all he got. It's not a coincidence that he won back-to-back national championships and then we got to the college football playoff. He helped bring a winning culture, I think, from Georgia over to the University of Texas, and was big for Quinn's development and big for Xavier Worthy's development, having a good number one across from him, or co-number one across from him. So both those guys on their way. What are your guys' initial thoughts on Bo, AD, and maybe the impact they had in our program?
I mean, we'll start off with Bo. The fact that he was able to turn, 3-star Tavondre Sweat into an Outland winner and, potentially being a first to second round draft pick in the NFL, and Byron Murphy, both guys being rated tops of PFF, in all of college football. It's awesome. And I am sad that he's leaving, but, the fact that Alfred Collins had as much time with him as possible and he's returning for one more year, the effect has already been done. It's already set in, where I don't think he's going to lose what's been passed down to him from Bo Davis. And hopefully he retains that information and that mentality and that culture and brings it to his game this year. And then whoever steps in, I think it's going to be the right decision. At the end of the day, it's a position coach. It's not a coordinator. So, it does set a different tone as far as culture goes. But ultimately, position coaches, they are there to kind of establish a bond and a brotherhood and, just like a mentality within a position group. And so our wide receiver room, our running back with Deshard Choice, our defensive lineman, ultimately what sets the tone for that is the players themselves. Yes, Choice is an amazing coach. Yes, Bo Davis is great. But the running back room is talented because of Jonathan Brooks and CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue and Bijan Robinson. The players are the ones that make the biggest impact. And so I'm at the end of the day, you need a guy who's going to be vocal and be a guy that is bringing these players together. But I'm confident with what we have. And I think that whoever steps in is lucky to be the Texas defensive line coach.
Yeah, it's a very desirable job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it makes it that much easier of a pill to swallow when he's going to his former alma mater, right? He's getting
personal.
He's getting paid more than he was at Texas. We were paying him $1 million a year. His salary starts off at $1.25 million next year. He also gets to coach his son, which we heard was one of the biggest factors in his decision making. His son is also named Bo, but it's not B-O, it's B-E-A-U, which to me is a massive indicator that he was headed to LSU to coach there at some point, right?
No X though.
No X. That's very, very true. But I think he was
running the Victorian
defensive line grad transfer from Southeastern Louisiana.
Yeah.
And I think just by way of the transferring rules, he can get to LSU in January he can get to LSU this semester as opposed to the 40 acres he would have been able to get to Austin in May by way of whichever rules, which I don't know. They're so confusing at this point. It's hard to keep track of them.
Yeah,
but he wants to coach his son, right? And you understand that. And so tip of the cap to him and all the work that he did. He was crucial in building this culture, but now we just hope that the culture that was established from the top down with Sark, and of course, worth mentioning CDC in there as well, because he's obviously a part of all of those hires. We'll still bring someone else in, and I love that we have that culture established already. One name that I'd like to throw out there is Frank Okam, who was a defensive lineman in the 2000s for the Horns. He most recently was a D line coach at Toledo in Ohio, but he's been the coach at Baylor. He coached for the Panthers for 2 years. He's been all over, but well, I mean, Josh, you made that face, but Brian Burns, he coached Brian Burns.
No, I just make the face of the Panthers. They actually have players. Derek Brown and Brian Burns are good players, but the Panthers organization stinks. So that's why I make the bleak face.
Most importantly, he was with the Texas Longhorns during the Mac Brown era when we were winning, competing for Big 12 championships, competing for national championships year in, year out. So he knows what it takes. And I think he'd be a great guy to bring back onto the 40 acres. We've already got Gideon in there. We've got former Longhorns on the staff, and I love more former Longhorns rejoining, right? That's always cool. So that's a guy I just wanted to throw out there as a potential.
That's great. I mean, we obviously love solutions and, names being thrown out. And we also have look, PK, I know he's one of the co-defensive coordinators now with Nansen, and now they're kind of splitting those duties, I guess will be the case. We'll have to see how all that plays out. But he coached the D-line. He was a former D-lineman. He coached the D-line from his beginning years as a head coach up until 2009. So he's there to lend a hand. He was also the linebackers coach this year, so they can move him around a little bit. And then Nansen, we've been told, he's going to help out in the defensive line as well. And that's why you have these types of guys in their roles, and that's why you have co-defensive coordinators, everyone's splitting duties, and you want as many great minds in the building as humanly possible. Like we've heralded Alabama in the past for being great, and we've heralded Alabama, for having, and, giving second chances to even guys like Sark, Bill O'Brien, and bringing the best minds they possibly can, and seeing how all these dudes work together. Even our former head coach, Chuck Strong. On the back of A.D. Mitchell, again, it would have been great to see him back. I wasn't, holding my breath. I don't think any of us were. But
we were as aggressive as we are in the transfer portal because we knew he's gone.
There's no surprises. Look, going into this season, best case scenario, Jatavian, A.D., Xavier, even Brooks, they were and maybe even Quinn were going to get drafted. That's at the end of the day is what you want. You want your players to be successful. You want these guys to play their best ball. And it's almost a blessing that we have Majors and we have Ewers and we have Alfred Collins back. We lost a lot, but we could have lost more. Yeah. And by and large, we've discussed it. We're a pretty young, as a whole, we're a pretty young team.
Yeah. And I think as well, having those guys come back for their senior years or even sometimes their fifth years, they probably look around the rest of the locker room and the rest of the roster, and they see that there's holes in veteran leadership. And every year, it's an honor to be a leader of a team. It's an honor to be a captain. When I was there playing as a walk-on, my senior leaders were both Malcolm Browns. Pretty funny.
Which ones do you like better?
Yeah. It's like picking a favorite child, can't do it. Quandre Diggs, Jordan Hicks, those are guys, that ended up playing in the league. And I think that also just that gives you a lot of veteran presence that you can pass down to younger players and also mature you a little bit more for when you do get to the league. And I think it's really great that, Gabenda's coming back. And as we mentioned, Jake Majors and Alfred Collins, these are guys that did need to come back, but they're doing it because they feel like they need to be the veteran leaders and prove themselves a little bit more. And, as we head to the SEC, you need that culture. Mm-hmm. So I'm really happy that these are the guys that are making their way back. But to go back on A.D. Mitchell, look, we have been as aggressive as we have been in this transfer portal going after multiple wide receivers because we knew, at the end of the day, yes, we have very intriguing young guys coming in like Ryan Wingo and Jonte Cook is sophomore and Ryan Niblett and more. There's all these athletes, but you still need guys who have put in some good playing time, that are not coming straight from high school or not coming off of a freshman year where they've only had 8 catches. You need a guy like Golden, who scored 2 touchdowns on this last year, this last season. And you need guys that we're looking at like CJ Daniels that's gone over for 1,000 yards and 10 plus touchdowns, and you need guys like that. It's just the nature of the beast. So respect to AD. It's fun because in Madden, it's not going to say Georgia next to his name where it says college. It's going to say Texas, where he got drafted out of.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Very true.
You're right, man. Like, look, and there's also no shame in bringing as many people in the building as possible and seeing, like, similar to coaching staff and seeing what you got. Like, will Daniels having 1,000-yard do end up bringing in CJ Daniels, we have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns? I don't know. Maybe not. But even if he does half that production, hey, that's 5 scores and 500 yards from the receiver position. If he's our receiver 3 behind Cook, behind guys like Wingo and Nibba, behind guys like Golden, who we're bringing in, who are really, more and more high on as the days go on and showed out against us, like, that's really strong production out of our wide receiver 3. So you don't know how guys are going to fit. You don't know how guys are going to step up. I think A.D. Mitchell stepped up even more than we anticipated coming over from Georgia and really amplified his production. Jonathan Brooks this past year stepped up more than we expected him to, especially after the first couple games, and filled Bijan Robinson's shoes as well as he could have. So Sark is going to get the most out of his juice. Get the most juice out of his orange juice. We've seen it time and time again.
Juice on the roster?
There's a lot of juice. I wish there was Juice Wells in the roster, but he went to Ole Miss. That's all good. So again, A.D. Mitchell, really great career as a Longhorn, albeit it was for 1 year. He did as well as we could have asked. And Bo Davis was a really big piece in us getting to where we are as a program today, and hopefully, helping us jump that next level where we don't revert back to a 4 or 5 loss team, and we're ever, going forward, worse, 2-loss team, which I still think with all of our losses, seeing who we have back in the building, we are in that range of a 2-loss team. And we spoke about it, like how we would have fared against Michigan. Looking at what Michigan's got going on and looking at what we're hearing, Harbaugh, it's no lock that he's returning to Ann Arbor. In fact, he may be going to Los Angeles, or he may be going to Vegas. He could be going, to the NFL and taking another crack at, the National Football League after finally getting over the hump and winning the national championship at Michigan. And, he had been at Stanford too. So again, with some really great players. So they're losing a bunch of guys. We'll see what happens with McCarthy, but we could be going into Ann Arbor potentially as the favorite. That's how good we're returning guys in the right spots, I do think, on the offensive line and at quarterback. So Georgia at home, I still really think that we're in a position that we're going to be a 1 or 2-loss team next year at worst. And Bo Davis is a massive part of that. And I want to say A.D. Mitchell is a big part of that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just all of the hubbub that happened like after we lost that game to Washington, and the conversations, Longhorn Twitter, Longhorn Nation, within our own show, about like who we thought could come back and who might stay, who might go to the draft. And at the end of the day, like, now that pretty much all of the chips have fallen, it's what we should have expected, right? Like, objectively, I think the guys that were ready to go to the league are going to the league. Like, any of the guys that would have, right, not really any surprises. And the guys that are staying, Majors and Collins and Benda, like, they have room to grow. And those guys might have been drafted, or they might have been undrafted free agents that have, found themselves on practice squads on NFL teams. I believe they're all NFL caliber players, but now they give themselves a better shot of getting higher up in the draft or being drafted. And so I love that for those guys. I love that they're staying. They're going to be excellent leaders in the locker room. And I hope that each and every one of them is able to raise their stock significantly. And I think they'll definitely get the opportunity. So it's just as funny that, like, everyone's we're like, oh, can AD stay? And it's like, realistically, like, he shouldn't have stayed. Right. And that's what he did. He was ready to go.
He was getting mocked in the first round by like being taken by the Kansas City Chiefs, at like the, top 28 to 32 picks. So look, if you're a first round talent, you go. That's just what it is. The guys who are staying, like, it's almost like they have a prove it year. They would have found themselves on a practice squad and maybe gone through a bunch of training camps and got cut. Like, this is a really big year for them to raise their stock and work their way into consideration. We've seen guys do it. Now, it's funny because if we looked at this team, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had guys like Lil Jordan Humphrey that declared a little too early and, didn't end up getting drafted where he thought he should have been. And luckily he's still playing the league, but I mean, he's not like, by any purposes like a star in this league. But for us, he was a big player that I think if he stayed next year, he could have worked his way up and maybe being a 2nd round draft pick and potentially had more value in the NFL than he does right now. But, I think that this is a completely different culture. And at the end of the day, I'm always going to say this: when guys go to the league and when they get drafted, it is a success for Texas, because that means more players want to come here and develop their talent here. That's what you want to build. That's the type of program you want to build. There's a reason why Alabama consistently out guys in the draft, and
And
that's what
guys
it is.
go there. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
it
Saban's
translates.
getting old. Like Saban's getting old. He doesn't like NIL. Doesn't like transfer portal. Who
Isn't
cares?
it crazy that like that translates to like a good college football program is putting
Yeah.
players in the NFL? That's wild.
Yeah, and it's also like I think it's very interesting you bring up LJ, like having a guy like Sark who comes from Alabama. Like I know he's been like around Washington, USC, but he's most recently come from Alabama. Having guys who are experienced and having a good culture in place actually helps guide guys. So I don't think they're sitting there in a meeting with AD Mitchell and being like, dude, we really need you to stay. Like, we'll give you X, Y, and Z and like are desperate. I think there's a lot of conversation looking out for AD being like, look, if you want to go, you're going to be a late first round, early second round pick. Good for you.
Sure, yeah.
If the benefit of you staying, like, hey, if you even do better than you did this year
top
and
15 pick,
you could be a top 5. Exactly. You could work your way up. So
but it's a gamble.
It's a gamble. Oh my God.
You can also lose stock. You can also get hurt, or you could have a terrible season.
We've like if you're going to be a top 10 pick, we always say, and like on our show, the Charity Stripe, if you're going to be a top 10 pick, you go. You're like, all right, you don't try to run it back and risk it. Like, but if you're a late second or late first round pick, second round pick, and you think you have the juice and you're an underclassman to get up to that first round level, like and lock yourself in there, it can't necessarily hurt you. So I'm sure that's a lot of the conversation that was had with AD. It's like how with JT Sanders and even Worthy. Like that's a lot of what's talked about, and that's like what a part of the culture is not only helping University of Texas out, but helping all the players that come through that get to the next level and get to the next level at the right pace.
At the end of the day, too, like, look, we say this all the time in the NFL. If you get drafted by a shitty organization, that could screw up your development, that could screw up the trajectory of your career. Where AD is getting mocked right now in that late first round, like he could potentially go into a Super Bowl contender.
Exactly. Like, look, I know I made a face about the theirs earlier, but if God forbid AD goes to Carolina, and look, wherever he gets drafted, we'll be happy for him. But we're talking about Pat Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs, or the Carolina Panthers, and we want guys to end up in the right spots too. So we're hoping that for the best for these guys. We're hoping he ends up, late first round. But again, if you go to the NFL, anything's great. But yeah, he really had a really strong career for great production, and we'll do our best to replace him internally. On to college hoops. Big 12, Cincinnati is in the Big 12. I know was a bit jarring for some people. Strong Big 12 team. They had 2 losses coming into this thing like us, or we had 3. They had 2 losses coming into this thing. We go to their home court. Wasn't pretty, but Dessou played his strongest and most efficient game. And ultimately Asmus get the game-winning shot, and we won.
Yeah,
and
I like it's a bit of an understatement. I mean, he scored 33 points in this game. Dylan Dessou.
Oh my God, he was
high.
Yeah, he's look, the thing on Dylan Dessou and the thing on the Texas Longhorns basketball team, we said it in our last show. There's so much that has to, like, from a continuity standpoint, Mitchell's role, even the guys that have returned, Mitchell's role is increased. Hunter's role has changed. You bring in a guy like Asmus who has to get acclimated from playing at a small school where he is the absolute focal point of the offense, and Oral Roberts, right, to coming here and playing more team basketball. You have guys like Horton, Weaver, Onyema, they're all transfers. Even like Shedrick is he comes from Virginia. It's a great basketball program, but he's a transfer. Dessou, who was our best player at the end of last year and is our best player right now, has proven yesterday. He has been working his way back from injury. He's only played 6 games. He only played half of our games, right? This is the 7th game yesterday. So there's so much that has to happen. And like, look, would we go into Kansas and we didn't and beat Bill Self at home? No, we didn't go to Baylor either and beat them on their home court. But Cincinnati ain't no slouch. I think it's a really nice, strong win. And all these Big 12 wins, it's a great bounce back win after losing the home opener in the Big 12 to Texas Tech. It's exactly what we asked for. We have to take care of business on these next 3 games. And that's step 1. Yeah. A win's a win in my book, and they're a solid basketball team.
And winning on the road is never easy. College, pros, whatever, any way you slice it, it's tough to win when you're not playing on your home court. And I think your point about Dessou being our best player is it's really important to me, at least, because you looked at last season and you could have said, because Dessou missed time last season too, right? And at times we were saying that we were trying to figure out who our best player was a lot of last year, who was going to get the ball at the very end of the game. And in games, early in the season, it was Marcus Carr, and then it was Timmy Allen at times. And Hunter obviously had a really, really strong showing in the NCAA tournament. But in the last month and a half of basketball that the Texas Longhorns played last year, Dessou became our best player. And I think a game like last night is really important for his confidence going forward and for the team to understand as they're fitting into roles, okay, who is our go-to guy, right? And 30 plus points in college is no easy feat. That is a big deal. And so we just need to kind of acknowledge that going forward. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a huge year for Dylan Dessou because this is not a guy that was being mocked in NBA drafts whatsoever. So this is an opportunity for him to jump up on boards. No, just realistically.
No,
like
I know it's like this draft class isn't that strong, like or like that strong on paper. There's a lot of fluidity and like Toss. I'm sure you look at as much as I do. Like there's a different guy being mocked every day at number one. Like there's so much fluidity in this NBA draft class. I'm not saying Dylan Dessou is going to be the first overall pick, but right,
what a world.
Yeah, I know, but there's a world where he could work his way if he's like really strong the rest of the season. We make the postseason
first.
Yeah, he get in the late first. He's athletic.
Yeah.
He went 4 of 10 as a big man from 3. He's showing he has that outside shot.
He's a good free throw shooter too, which helps a lot. Just for anyone listening that like doesn't pay a lot of attention to NBA mock drafts, Zach Edey, who is quote unquote the best player in college basketball, he was given the Naismith Award last year, is mocked at like the 56th spot in the NBA draft. So late in the second round. So that just goes to show there's not always a direct correlation to college production to NBA production.
His style of play doesn't translate to the NBA.
Right.
I mean, he's just a big guy that bullies, 18-year-old kids. you can't do that. You can't do that in the NBA.
No.
But, sounds like Toss at LA Fitness.
Yeah, totally. Bullying kids. But with Dessou, I mean, I think he's been challenged a lot in his career with injuries and finally taking a step to get healthy. And it's been great that he's been adding other elements to his game. The 3-ball wasn't necessarily something that we had been looking at when he came in from Vanderbilt. The biggest thing that we were always looking for was that he was the leader in rebounds in the ICC. And that kind of fell off a little bit when he had his injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's starting to work his way into like just an all around good player. He can do it all. And that's super valuable, especially at this level when, you need a guy who can go out there and dominate with size. So this just shows you like the value in staying sometimes. And yes, I know that he was never really going to be drafted because of the injuries and just because of the productivity, but doesn't matter how everyone develops at different speeds and different trajectories. And I think there's just this weird like mentality in college hoops in the NBA where it's like, all right, 18 years old, 19 years old, like this is my shot. You got to go right away. And like as young men, you develop till you're like 25 years old. So there could totally be late bloomers out there. And I don't know why the NBA is the only sport that sees it that way, because there's guys, that decide to not go the MLB draft out of high school that probably could get drafted and they go to college instead to develop their talent for 3 years. Obviously in NFL, you have to go for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
But NBA is the only one that's like, all right, 18 years old. And I get that you can kind of see raw, skill right off the bat when, they're 14, 16 years old, with their basketball IQ and their handles and their shooting ability. But, as a sport that is so athletically driven and, like how high you can jump and how tall you are and how strong you are, like it doesn't make a ton of sense, So I'm glad that Mitchell's
roster.
Yeah,
I would say that's why like the roster's like short in the NBA. Like you only have 15 spots compared to 53 in the NFL. Like so it's a bit tougher for guys to get in there and hang on. But I'm with you. Like the leash is a lot shorter in the NBA. You have a lot like less chances to get it right in the NBA because they'll send you to the G League. You get booted to overseas. Like there's so much competition in the NBA to like for guys to stick on the roster. Yeah. So
it's funny you say booted overseas. It's like you're still getting paid like
and those FIBA those Euros look sweet, dude.
Go play in Greece. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. That atmosphere, a little tzatziki.
I gotta live in Mykonos and play basketball for money.
Horrible. It's a very glass half full way to look at it. I love that. What I will say on the last bit on Texas hoops defensively. And just maybe if like a on the court feel, I would love to see Rodney Terry work the lineup where it's Shedrick, Dessou, Mitchell. We're playing bigger at the forwards and center spot, and then we have Hunter and Asmus Smith is a really strong offensive player. I think having Dessou out there is going to take and alleviate a lot of the load that he's been carrying offensively, but he's not the defensive stalwart that Marcus Carr was. And, I think we've lost a little bit of that, but having some length out there with Dessou, Shedrick, and Mitchell, who's really, you talk about guy coming back and growing his game. Like I would love to see Rodney Terry work that rotation in. I think that'd be pretty beneficial. And I'd love to see people ease up on Rodney Terry. Like, I don't know. I tell you guys all the time, I'm in a group text where he gets so much flack, and it's like, I don't know what people, and first of all, I don't know what people thought we were going to do after he won the Big 12 tourney and went to the Elite Eight. Like, who are we going to bring in? It's not like Calipari and Coach K were waltzing through the door. Like, this isn't La La Land, or Mark Few or Scott Drew are leaving the programs where they're kicking ass. And he proved to take over the program, and he's honestly recruited really well for the 2024 recruiting class. Like we've spoken about, we have Trey Johnson. We have two other guys, and according to 24/7 Sports, they're in the top 40. Like, he's a pretty good recruiter, and he's brought in some good guys in the transfer portal. So I would love to see him shake up the lineup a little bit now that Dessou's healthy, and maybe work Brock Cunningham back to the bench.
It's tough. I'm just thinking about our rosters. You'd like to have A. Smith and Hunter out there, but you just give up a lot of size.
That's why I was trying to throw out.
Yeah, and it's tough because Carr had good size, right, for a guard, and we don't really have as good of a shooter as A. Smith is. He's in a point guard's body. We don't have like a Jordan Hawkins type like UConn had last year, where we have a 6'5", 6'6" guy that can go out there, stretch the floor with his shooting ability. We have, we can run that big lineup like you're talking about with Shedrick and Dessou and Mitchell, which I think presents a lot of challenges defensively for any team that we're playing. In their half court offense, they're going to struggle, but they're going to attack our guards every single play. And we're just going to, that's the one thing with Brock, is that he's shown that he can shoot that spot up three decently well. And obviously, like, he's going to give full effort on the defensive side. He helps out with the rebounding load. He's just one of those guys where, talent wise, sure, he's not the same as some of the other, elite college basketball players, but effort level between the ears, he knows where to be on the court, and you never have to question whether or not he's going to dive on the ground for a loose ball. He's just going to be on the court. Like, that's just the fact of the matter. But I'm interested to see if our rotation gets a little bit bigger through the next few games. We only played 8 guys in this game.
Yeah, it was a short bench.
And so, we have to do what we have to do to win games. But on the opposite side, Cincinnati played, I think, 10 or 11 guys. So they're still trying things out. Maybe that's just confidence in Rodney Terry, knowing what the rotation is that he needs for conference play and going past that. In which case, that's a coach who's doing exactly what he needs to do. And Josh, you can tell the haters to stuff it.
Buzz off.
Yeah. But
he's gonna hit.
It'll be interesting. Who's our next game on the schedule for Horns?
Sorry, let me pull that up for you. I think the next slate of games, Saturday evening, we're at West Virginia, who they're on the down. We have next Wednesday UCF at home before the following Saturday, in which we have the Baylor Bears. I hate them. Why do we always have Baylor like on a Saturday morning in January? Like, I feel like I'm in like a bizarro world where that, like, it's Groundhog's Day and it happens every year.
Not gonna happen next year.
No, it won't. But Baylor, we have to win those games because Baylor's got some. Do you want to talk about pros? Misi and Walter, Misi the big man and Walter the guard are
Mr. Misi is on their team. It's crazy.
Evis Misi, he's the big man. He's a pretty potent prospect, and Jacoby Walter is pretty dynamite. Like similar, to he's a really good scoring guard and he's a really good offensive guard like Keontae George was, and he was a handful for us last year and even have his best game. So it's gonna be a big matchup against Baylor. Luckily, we have them at home to start.
Yep. I like that. I think this Saturday morning, that game, Hook 'em Horns, we want to feel like, one of the big blue blood basketball programs. And you think about Duke, UNC, and you think about the fans sleeping overnight in tents before they have to wake up for the next morning's game and then head to the arena, cheer their hoops team on, and hopefully get a W. And that's what we'll be hoping for as well. We will see everybody tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And if you think that the Horns will get the dub, go put your money at betonline.ag.
Yeah.
Use the promo code BELIEVE, BLAAV. Get 50% off your welcome bonus.
Thanks, BetOnline. Hook 'em Horns. See you, everybody.